we're going to be going over how you implement forgot password. Now, if you haven't already, I'd recommend watching my last video where we went over how to send a confirmation email and confirm users. Now, we're going to be doing a very similar technique to that in this video, where we're going to be sending a token to the user's email, and they're going to click on a URL that has a token in there, and then we're going to use that token to verify the user is who they say they are when they change their password. So let's go ahead and get started with this. We're going to start by heading over to our code and creating a new resolver in our modules user. So I'm going to call this forgot password. And inside of here, we're going to have our resolver class. And I'm going to just copy the confirm user and grab the code in it. And we're going to just rename it like we usually do. So forgot password resolver. So the forgot password is the name of this mutation. We're going to keep the @mutation decorator. I'm fine returning a boolean whether or not we were able to send the email. In this case, we're going to have a single argument, the person's email, and we're just going to basically send an email in here. And we're going to return true pretty much always. So our actual sending of the email is going to be very similar to what we did with the create confirmation URL. So we create a URL here, and in our register, we sent that using send email. So we're going to do basically the same technique. So I'm going to copy what we did here, and we're going to just change it a little bit. And we need to actually grab the code for create confirmation URL. Now we could create another function if we wanted to, but what I'm going to do is just do it inline in the resolver, because we're only really doing one thing inside of here, which is creating this token. Alright, so here what I'm going to do is we're going to import send URL, or sorry, send email, and we're going to get rid of this function here. And what we're going to do is we're going to first start by importing or fetching the user, So we're going to say user.findOne. And we're going to fetch by the email. And now if we don't find a user, we're just going to return false. Actually, no, I'm just going to return true still. If you wanted to, I don't want to indicate to the end user whether or not the email exists in our database. So I'm choosing to just return true in both cases. But I'm basically not user there. But basically, you could also throw an error back here if you'd like to, and just be like, hey, the user was not found with that email. So after that, we have the user. So we have the user ID. So we're going to say user.id here, and we're going to import v4 from UUID. And this is going to be our URL, which we're going to pass to send email. We're going to import Redis, and I'm going to say user/forget password. And really this should be change password. So the idea of this function or this resolver is we accept an email of the person that they want to forget the password for. We find the user account associated with them. And then we are going to create a token, and then we're going to store that in Redis. And again, you can set a different expiration date if you like for this. So maybe you want to give them a week to forget their password, a day, whatever you like. We're going to be using a day for now. And then we're going to send this URL to the user. And in a real application, you'll want to create like separate email templates for your forget password and confirm email. But we're just going to use the same function here where it just sends them a URL for a sample. And then we just have a URL with the token inside of it. It's a good idea to prefix our token or our key here now, because we're using the token in both our confirmation tokens and the forget password tokens. So to do this, I like to just create a constant, and I'll create a new folder for it. I'm going to say constants, and we're going to create Redis prefixes .ts, and I'm just going to say export confirmation prefix, and this I'm going to just say user confirmation colon, and then I can create a forget password prefix. And this we're just going to say forget password. And now if I come back over here, I can just prefix it at the beginning, forget password prefix, and I'm also going to add a prefix to our one over here. And the idea with this is you now can't use the confirmation email to reset your password, and you can't use your reset password token to confirm the user. So in this case, it doesn't really matter if you reuse the token for each one, but in other cases, it's good to have a prefix so you don't have users using the tokens for things they shouldn't be doing. All right, so let's actually try this out now. We should send the email. We need to add this resolver to this right here. And so we could do the same thing we have been doing, importing them. But there's actually another way we can do this with TypeGraphQL that makes it a little simpler. So every time we add a resolver, we don't have to come back over here. So we can actually point a glob statement to our folder structure over here and tell TypeGraphQL where our resolvers are located, and it'll actually automatically import them. So we can say dir name, and then we're going to say /modules/user. Well, actually not even /user. All directories inside of here .ts. And so it's going to grab the resolvers and all the TypeScript files that we have in here. So now I don't have to individually import these. And also, this is a special variable in Node that tells you the current directory. So we can see it has restarted over here. And now if we go to GraphQL Playground, I'll refresh. You'll notice our schema has not changed any. Well, it has. We added an extra forgot password mutation. But this is kind of a convenient method to auto import stuff with TypeGraphQL. It's pretty nice. All right, so we're going to create a new tab here, and I'm going to say mutation, forget password. And here, again, we could just try a random email, and it's just going to return true. But if we look at our log over here, nothing gets actually sent. But now if we grab a password or a user, bob4@bob.com, and we click it, you'll notice it takes a little longer because it's actually sending the email. And we can come back over here. We can actually click on the preview URL, and we now have a token sent to us, and we could click on this. We could go to our front-end API or front-end, and we could actually fill in a new password and then send the token in the URL or in the mutation. So we're going to fill in that mutation part, the change password mutation, where we pass in a token and a new password, and it updates the user. And in the future, we'll create the client side for this. So let's create this second half that I was just referring to. So under user, I'm going to say change password. And I'm going to copy what we have here and paste it in here. And so we're just going to use this as, again, as a starter point. So change password resolver. And actually, now I'm just thinking I should really create this into a template like I do with React. So I could just auto create a resolver that's empty. I think I'll show you guys how to do that in the next video. So let's go ahead and rename this to change password. And I'm going to create a input argument that we're going to use. And we're going to return a user from this. So I'm going to say user. And it's going to be possibly null. So we'll say nullable is true. And here I think I'll call this, I guess, data. And I'm going to create a new folder here called change password, because I want to add the change password input type. All right, so we're going to be copying what we were using over here. And we're going to get rid of all these fields. We're going to have a password field. We're also going to have a token field. And we don't have any validation on this right now, but I'm going to come back and talk about that in a little bit. So change password input, and now we can use that over here. Change password input as our type. All right. And so inside of this, what are we going to do now? So I'm going to destructure this. I'm going to say token, and I'm going to say password. And let's go ahead and get rid of this stuff right here. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to grab this token, and we're going to see if it is a legitimate token. Oh, and one thing I just saw is we're not returning a user right here. So I'm saying user. All right, so here we're going to say const user ID is equal to await redis.get. And then here we're going to pass in our key, which is going to be the forget password prefix plus the token. All right, so if we do not get a user ID, we're going to return null. So we should say or null here. So this means the token again has expired, or we got a bad token. And then here we're going to actually try to fetch the user associated with it. So we're going to say user.find1. And actually we can just pass in the ID. That's the default check. And then we can check if not a user. Again, something went wrong. We should be getting a user for if we got a user ID from Redis. And then here we can say user.password, and we can put in our new password. Now we don't just want to say password like this, because we need to make sure to hash our password before setting it. So get rid of that, import bcrypt, and we'll just say bcrypt.hash. And again, just pass in our password that we get from the input and salt of 12. And I'm going to say await. And then once we set the password here, we're going to say user.save to save it in the database. We could have also done an update statement. Say user.update like we did kind of with the confirm user, and passed in a new password. But this is another way you can also update data, is by fetching the user and then setting the fields and then hitting save. So that's another way you can do it with type-orm. And then lastly, if we got a token like this, we just want to say redis.delete on the token to make sure it's not viable anymore, and that people can't just keep resetting their password over and over, although I'm not sure anyone really would do that with the same token anyway, or changing their password really in this case. And then lastly, we're just going to return the user. And one thing I just remembered is we added this prefix thing, but we didn't update our confirm user over here. So when we get the token for confirm user, we just need to prefix it with our confirmation prefix. And I don't actually like the name confirmation. I'm going to say confirm user prefix. And so what I just did there also, by the way, is a little VS Code trick. If you hit F2, this brings up this little window, and you can refactor the name across your whole project. So I just renamed it because I didn't like what I named it there. All right, so let's test this out now. So, oh, I need to hit a save over there too. So we should have this new change password resolver. Again, we don't need to input or change anything in our index file over here, because it's automatically going to discover this this guy over here, this resolver. And we can now pass in the token that we just got from our email. So this is the token that we got. We're going to come back over here. We're going to refresh. We should see a change password. We do. All right, so I'm going to say mutation, change password, data, token, and now we can pass in our new password. I don't know, and we're going to make this pretty. And let's grab an ID, an email, first name, last name. And I'm just going to see if it'll let me bring this down so you guys can see the entire thing. All right, so we passed in our data. Let's go ahead and update. We get a user back. So we should also, let's see if this updated. It should update the password like we saw. So let's go ahead and just verify that that works now. So now if I say Bob4 here and I use my old password, we should get a bad response. I can say I don't know here, and we get back the correct user. The other thing you can do as well with forgot password, or I guess the change password resolver that I like to do, is log in the user after they've changed their password, or automatically log in the user after they've changed their password. So it's very easy to do this. We can access the context. So context, my context is the type that we used for it. Make sure I add a comma there. And we're at the bottom here, we're just going to say context.request.session.userid. And we just set it to the current user. And you'll notice this is exactly what we're doing in the login over here. We're setting the user ID. So we're doing the exact same thing in the forgot password, or sorry, change password resolver here. And so what that means is when I go over here to change the password is we'll actually get a cookie and be logged in for that. And there's one last thing that I just want to touch on real quickly that's cool about TypeGraphQL is over here in our register input, we didn't end up actually adding validation to our password. But on hindsight, we may want to add something like minimum validation. So like maybe the password is a minimum of like 5. So we don't care how long it is, but as long as you put at least 5 characters in there. So for this, we now have kind of like a duplicate validation, right? Because we want to also add this min5 to the change password input over here. Because when you're updating your password, so let's actually import that too. When you're updating your password or creating your password for the first time, we want to make sure it's a valid password either way. So we now have duplicates. So like if I add more validation to this password later in the life cycle of this project, I then have to update it in 2 places. So that's kind of annoying. But one thing we can do with TypeGraphQL is kind of reduce that. So we can reduce this by abstracting this password field out. So one way we can do that is by creating kind of like a type that we can inherit from. So we can create a new, I'm going to create a new folder for this, which I'm going to call it shared. Inside of it, I'm going to call it password input.ts. And so what my password input is going to be is I'm going to copy the register input. We're going to copy just this part. So just the field here, and I'm going to rename this to password input. And we can get rid of the things that were not needed from the import. And then from our register import, we can extend it. So extends, and then what did I call it? Password input. And so I don't actually need this field here anymore. And so I can do the same thing for the change password input. And I can say extends password input. And so now I'm still going to have a password field on both of these input types. Server's running, I can refresh and verify that. So if I look on change password and I scroll down to the change password input, you'll notice that a password is required. But the cool thing now is, right, I have that abstracted out and the validation is going to run in both places. So let's just verify that that works too. So we just need to test one of them and we'll know both work. So we're going to test the register one because it's a little easier. We don't have to send a whole email. So I'm going to register a new guy called Bob6 and he is going to have a password of just Q. So we're going to try registering it. And voila, we have a argument validation error. We scroll down, we can see exactly what it says. Password must be at least 5 characters, or cannot be less than 5, I mean. So that's kind of cool thing you can do with TypeGraphQL, is we now have kind of extracted this one field out into a generic type, which we can then extend from both those places. And so now, again, we can add validation to this one password, and it'll update in both places.